All right, so today I want to talk about domain and range of graphs. Um, so what we've done in the past is whenever we talked about domain, we talked about discrete values. We talked about a set of order pairs, but we've never really officially looked at the domain of a continuous graph. So what I want you to remember is that the domain is the set of all your input values. So when we talk about graphs, we're talking about our x coordinates. And the domain, I basically mess around with the x coordinates along a horizontal line, your horizontal axis. The range concerns your output or your y values, and I want to know how low does the graph go to how high does it go. So for our very first look into the domain and range of graphs, we're going to start with finite graphs. They have a definite beginning, a definite ending, however you want to describe it. So when we look at this very first graph, I want to start with the domain. Please notice that there is an open circle. Also notice that there is a closed circle, okay? And I like this sheet because the closed circle is a square, and that's going to help us whenever we start using interval notation. Notice this is an open circle, and that's also important. So when I talk about interval notation, I'm going to have my lesser value followed by my greater value, separated by a comma. And if I can touch the lower bound, I'm going to have a bracket. My bad. Okay, and you'll notice here, when we can touch this, that does sort of make a bracket. So this means we include the endpoint. Okay, if I do not want to include the endpoint, I'm going to use a parenthesis. And you'll notice here you can sort of see a rounded piece. So that's another visual cue for you, especially with this worksheet, which is fabulous. All right, so domain deals with the x coordinates. What x coordinates are used in this graph? In other words, how far to the left do I go? And then how far to the right does this graph go? Well, the piece that's furthest to the left has an x coordinate of -5. I don't go any more to the left than -5. And I do not touch the -5, so I'm going to put a left parenthesis there. How far to the right does this graph go? Well, it goes all the way out here. This is the order pair 5, -5. So the farthest x coordinate is 5. And I do touch the 5, so I'm going to put a bracket there. One thing that I showed my other classes was this one goes from -5 to 5. We do not touch here, so we can put a parenthesis. We do touch here, so we put a bracket. And that leads us to this interval. And then I realized with another class, what I could do is sort of say I wanted to enclose this area. The left side of the enclosure goes to -5. The right side of the enclosure goes to +5. So you can see those there. Okay, and actually, let me go ahead and write these this way. All right, now let's talk about the range. The range travels from my lowest y coordinate to my highest y coordinate. So it looks like my smallest y coordinate out of all of my y coordinates is -5. And notice this is a closed circle, so I do touch the -5 here. My greatest y coordinate, well, that's up here at +5. And that's an open circle, so we get a parenthesis here. So we exclude that endpoint. And then you're wondering, okay, so if we wanted to enclose this graph, what's the top bound? Well, the top bound here is 5, which is on this side. And then the lower bound is down here, at -5. Okay, so that's how domain and range work. And I don't think that's enough of a color contrast, so I'm going to have to switch colors in just a second. All right, so let's think about this again. When I look at my domain, how far to the left does my graph go? Well, it's going to go all the way out here to x equals -5. How far to the right does it go? It goes all the way out to x equals +5. Now let's look at the range. What are my possible y values? Well, my y coordinates travel all the way down to -5, and then my y coordinates travel all the way up to +5. And that's how you find the domain and range for this first one. I'm going to remove my pencil so you can see the color. Not enough of a contrast, but I'm a fast learner. I'll pick it up on my second graph. Speaking of our second graph, let's look at this one, okay? Let's start with the domain again. And it's pretty cool because D alphabetically comes before R and X alphabetically comes before Y. So maybe that will help. I don't know. But let's look at our domain. How far to the left does this function travel or cover? Well, it looks like it goes all the way out here to -4. And I notice that it's a closed circle, so we include the -4. Okay? Notice we are containing this graph here. Then I'm going to look to the right side. How far to the right does this thing travel? Well, this thing travels all the way to +4, and that's a closed circle. That's included. So there's my domain. All right, and now let's look at our range. What is the lowest that this graph goes? Well, it goes down to these 2 points here, and that happens at -5. And that -5 is included, so it's going to get a bracket. And how high does this graph travel? Well, it travels all the way here to -1. All the way up here to -1. And that is actually on the y equals -1 line, so that's also included. All right, so I've written the answer, but I want to make sure that you understand where it all came from. So let's talk about it. My domain is -4 to 4. That means if I consider all of my possible x coordinates, my possible x coordinates go from -4 all the way over to x equals +4. And notice it's even all the pieces in between. 1/2, 3 1/2, -3 1/2. So those are all the possible values for my x coordinates. That's my domain. My range, how low does this graph go? Well, it goes all the way down to -5. So that's my lowest y coordinate, and it goes all the way up to y equals -1. So what I'm thinking of is if I'm sort of boxing up this graph, what are the limitations of my box? My box goes from -4 to 4 on the width, on the x-axis, the domain, and it goes from -5 to 4 on the height, my y coordinates, and that's my range. So many ways to think about it. It's pretty cool. All right, let's look at this next one. And man, if this is not a super fun graph, I don't know what is. All right, so let's look at my domain here. How far to the left does this thing go? Well, I see that the farthest out it goes is here at -2. And it's got an open circle at -2. So we're going to put a parenthesis there. All right, how far to the right does this graph go? Well, this graph goes all the way to x equals 4. And again, we have an open circle, so we'll put a parenthesis there. Okay, so what am I saying? I'm saying my graph has a width that extends from x equals -2 to x equals 4. X equals -2 to x equals 4. Oh, I guess I should have written that in here just to kind of keep everything going. All right, now let's look at the range. How does my graph travel vertically? Well, it starts down here at -3. And it's got an open circle here at this point on -3. But right here you see a closed circle. So we're actually going to put a bracket there. And how high does this thing go? Well, this thing goes all the way up to +3. And we include the +3 at this point in the graph. That's a closed circle. So my upper bound is +3 inclusive. So let's look at it again. My x values can take on any value between -2 and 4. My y coordinates can take on any value from -3 to 3. I exclude -2 and 4 on my width, but I include -3 and 3 on my height, which is my range. All right, let's look at our next one. I'm feeling a little confident here, feeling all right. So I notice that I've got closed circles everywhere. I see no open circles, so be ready to use brackets. All right, so my x coordinates can take on any value from down here at -2, inclusive, all the way over here to 3, inclusive. So my domain is -2 to 3. And now I want to look at my y coordinates. Okay, so when I look at my y coordinates, I have my smallest y coordinate is at -1 inclusive, and my greatest y coordinate is at +1 inclusive. So here we are, and that's it. It's not bad, is it? All right, still feeling good, right? Okay, so let's look at this one. All right, I love this graph. It's got a nice little curve, but again, don't let the curve distract you or cause you anxiety. We're still doing the same thing that we've done so far. My domain, how far to the left does this function travel? Well, it travels all the way to x equals -3. And it's on a closed circle, so we put a bracket. Oh my gosh, y'all, think about this. What did I just draw here? I just drew a vertical line. What's the equation of that vertical line? Well, that equation is x equals -3. And that's what our left bound is. Dude, so cool. All right, let's look at our right bound. This graph travels all the way over to x equals 5. So my upper bound is 5, and it's on a closed circle. So we're going to put a bracket there. +5, Moron. All right, there we go. So it goes to +5. My bad, y'all. Okay, let's look at our range. Our range, remember, I want to know the possible y coordinates here. Well, the lowest y coordinate occurs down here at -4, and it's a closed circle. And our greatest y coordinate is here at y equals 2, the horizontal line y equals 2. And again, that's a closed circle, so we're bracketing these as well. So our interval is from -4 to 2. All right, so that's what I have for my domain and range. Notice my x coordinates can take on any value between -3 all the way over to 5. My y coordinates can take on any value from -4 all the way up to 2. Number 6. This looks simple, but man, it looks fun too. My domain. How far to the left does this function travel? Well, it travels all the way to here, all the way to x equals -5. And it's an open circle, so we're going to put a parenthesis. How far to the right does this graph travel? Well, it stops here at x equals 5. And we include the 5 because of the closed circle. So let me just put this down here to keep everything consistent. So my x coordinates are any value between x equals -5 to x equals 5. That's what that interval says. And now let's look at our range. Our range involves the y coordinates. So what are the possible values of my y coordinates? Well, the lowest that it goes is down all the way to -2, and we include the -2. And how high does this thing travel? Well, it travels all the way up to y equals 2. But notice where y equals 2 has an open circle, so we put a parenthesis. So this is, oh darn, low to high, Denise. We're going to go down to -2, which we include. We'll go all the way up to +2, which we exclude. Man, that's why that was such a fun one, because the placement of your open circle and closed circle does affect how this goes. And not like me, you also have to know bottom to top, but we're getting there. Okay, number 7. My domain, remember, considers my possible x coordinates. And so it looks like my least x coordinate, my smallest, is down here at -5, and it's an open circle, so we need a parenthesis there. And it travels to the right all the way until this boundary where x equals +5. And again, that's an open circle. So my domain goes from -5 to +5, both exclusive. We do not include the endpoints. All right, my range. My range concerns my y coordinates. My smallest y coordinate, it goes all the way down here to -4. And it's going to go all the way up here to y equals -2. And those, oh, just kidding. That, my dear, is a closed circle. So I have made a mistake, which I'm correcting right now. All right, let's see if I can do this. My range describes my y coordinates. My smallest y coordinate is -4. I do not include the -4, so I have a parenthesis. My greatest y coordinate is at -2. I do include the endpoint, therefore I get a bracket. All right, it's taken me 7 examples, but I'm finally understanding the flow here. Let's review. My possible x coordinates can be any number between -5 and 5. My possible y coordinates can be any number between -4 and -2. I can include the -2 because we've snuck a little open circle or closed circle there. Good grief, Robodeer. All right, last one. My x coordinates. My x coordinates travel anywhere between, let's see, x equals -5, and we include the -5, and it travels all the way to here where x equals 4, which has an open circle. So we put a parenthesis there because we exclude the 4. X's go from -5. Here, x is -4, x is -3, x is -2, x is -1, x is 0, x is 1, x is 2, x is 3, x is almost 4. So that's why we have a parenthesis. I had to do that in one of these, y'all, just to kind of spell out every possibility, because we also have the points in between. The range deals with the height of my graph. How low does my graph travel? Well, it travels all the way here to where y equals 4, and we include the y because we've got a closed circle. And how high does this graph go? It's going to go all the way up here to where y equals 5. Do we include the 5? No, we do not, because we have an open circle. All right, so my possible y coordinates are 4, 4.5, just kidding, 4 and like 1/8, 4 and 1/4. Oh, I should be doing fifths here, come on. So there's 4.5, and then it works its way up to 5, but we do not include the 5. All right, so here's what I have. My graph has a width that carries from -5 to 4. Those are my possible x coordinates, which is called my domain. Then my graph has a height from y equals 4 to y equals 5, and we do not include the 5. And the possible y coordinates describe my range, and my range then goes from 4 inclusive to 5 exclusive. So that's how I would look at domain and range. How wide my graph goes is my domain. How tall my graph goes is my range. And I would like to give a shout out to mathaids.com because they provided this wonderful worksheet for me. They also provided an answer key, and that's what I had uploaded onto your It's Learning, onto my It's Learning, so you can see everything there. They have extra sheets and extra practice if you need it. So that's how we find domain and range, guys. How far to the left, how far to the right for domain, how low to how high for range. On a finite graph, our next ones will deal with infinite graphs. Whoa, there.